Hi, I'm Jerry Peterson with Brightside Inc. And in today's webinar, we're going to take a look at what organizations can do to improve their performance without adding headcount or tools. And let's just state up front, adding headcount or tools can increase your productivity. But I think it makes sense to actually improve our productivity with what we have before we think about adding additional headcount or tools. Hopefully you agree with that. And let's see what our agenda will be today. All right, so in our agenda, we're going to look at our purpose and objectives. We're going to do how to improve an organization. We're going to take a look at the three ways of improving an organization. We're going to take a deep dive on flow and feedback and continuous learning, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. Ready for that? So let's take a look at one of my heroes in this particular field is a man, John Kotter. He wrote the book Accelerate. And you can read his quote. The world is now changing at a rate at which the basic systems, structures, and cultures built over the past century cannot keep up with the demands being placed on them. Undoubtedly true. Our systems, our technology is raging way ahead of what we are able to handle from a corporate culture perspective and from a process and policy perspective. And he says traditional organizational structures were designed for stability in a predictable world, and that does not describe what's happening today. Today's rapid pace of change demands a more adaptive approach to how we organize, lead, and improve our teams. In order to thrive in this environment, we must fundamentally reconsider how we operate. And I think that's going to be the driving point behind this whole webinar. There's a few things we should keep in mind. There's quotes that I love from very successful people in the past who have led organizational change. By Deming, we have a quote: "Bad systems beat good people every time." It doesn't matter how good or talented our people are. If our systems are poor, the people are going to struggle. And we have to recognize that. So systems don't have to be tools necessarily. They can be the processes and policies that we put in place. Another quote from Deming was, most people are doing their best already. So we can't expect to improve them because in the situation, the context that people have, they're already doing their best to do what they can. So they're putting in their best effort with the constraints they have and assuming otherwise leads to misguided interventions. We need a new set of rules to operate by. This was a quote from David Marquet. In his book, Leadership as Language, he identified 6 new rules which replace the rules we've worked with for over 100 years. And we need to be aware of system complacency. System complacency is evidenced by your people saying, oh, well, that's just how it's done here. That means they've given up. So they are not willing to put forward effort to actually improve your organization anymore because they've been beaten by your system and know that it is a foolish venture and not worth their time. We also have to recognize conflicts between cost accounting and productivity. Cost accounting is very valuable. We need it for actually organizing our money, but we shouldn't be making decisions about how we improve productivity from a cost accounting perspective because cost accounting has us optimized at the individual component level instead of at the system level. And that can be disastrous for an organization. Um, let's take a look at the 3 ways. In the 3 ways, we're going to have 3 major components. And if you take anything from this webinar, whenever you're looking to make changes to your organization, look at these 3 ways and ask yourself, is this change going to improve one of these 3 things? It should be improving either flow, which is the movement of work through our organization to produce delivered value to our customers. It should be improving feedback. And this is actually something that I see as tremendously lacking in most organizations. And it's why leadership can't give up their hands-on approach to leading. We need them to be able to feel comfortable with how things are progressing and see it as it's happening so that they can step away and let the people who are actually doing the work and have the best information make the decisions. The third is continuous learning, and we should be engaged in continuous learning at every step. So we should be looking at not only how can we do it better, how can we improve our skills, are there any other tools that we need to be learning to that will actually help us along the way. So those are the three main areas that we can improve on as an organization to actually help increase our organization's productivity. All right, let's dive a little deeper into each of them. Let's start with flow. So there's actually 8 flow accelerators. These come from John Kotter's book that actually will help you improve your flow of value through your organization. The first of them is to visualize and limit WIP. WIP is work in progress, if you didn't know that. And we need to be able to see it and limit it to make sure that we don't get too much WIP stuck in any one component of our organization at any given time. That leads to context switching and to multitasking, and both of those are very detrimental to productivity. The second is we need to address bottlenecks. Bottlenecks are those components of our systems that are in place, the process that we have to go through in order to deliver value, where we have the least amount of capacity. So there's always one. Every system out there has some kind of bottleneck. The third is to minimize handoffs and dependencies. That should be fairly obvious. The fewer times we have to pass work from one person to another, and the less dependent we are, especially on outside entities to the team that we're working on, the better, more efficient we will be. We need to get faster feedback. So it is really detrimental if we're working on something and something goes wrong, if we can't provide feedback to where it went wrong very quickly so that they can correct the situation and get things working in peak form. 5 is work in smaller batches. It always makes sense to reduce how big of items of work that we have given to any individual. In fact, this is a very big component of what our work hierarchy. So breaking work from large pieces of work into medium sized pieces of work into small pieces of work is so that we can track the work and see how the large pieces are being completed by looking at the smaller pieces that are children of that. We need to reduce queue length. That's number 6. And we need to optimize time in the zone. The 8th one is we need to remediate legacy policies and practices. Now, this is a major component, and I think it's one of the things that restricts organizations today, because we jump on the bandwagon, we see the next shiny object that comes out, the next technology. We say, oh my God, that's going to help us. That's going to transform our business. But we fail to change the policies and practices and procedures in our organization in order to leverage that new technology. That was very well documented in Eli Goldratt's book, Necessary but Not Sufficient. All right, moving on. Let's take a look at them individually. So breaking them down, we need to look at limiting WIP. And here's a visual representation of it. If we get a whole bunch of work stuck in one particular area, whether that's building something or manufacturing something or delivering on a loan application or whatever, we've got too much stuck in one place, we're not going to get very efficient work. It decreases team productivity, it confuses priorities, it increases context switching, and impedes the flow of value. So if we set WIP limits so that we don't allow a team to take on more work until they've completed the work that they're working on, that will and in the long run make us more efficient. We need to deal with bottlenecks, and this is actually we've got everybody has bottlenecks, otherwise called constraints. So we need to identify the current bottleneck in your workflow. We need to exploit the constraint in our workflow. That means to maximize its efficiency, make it as efficient as possible. So, and ensure that it is never started to work. So any constraint or bottleneck that gets started to work means that we're not getting anything out of it. The constraint is the cadence for the whole system and defines the maximum workflow. So anytime the constraint is not working, we are reducing the workflow of the whole system at that point to zero. We need to subordinate other processes to the constraint. That means we don't want to overload the constraint. And by definition, it also means that every other component in our system needs to have excess capacity. And we'll see a further example of that later. We need to elevate the constraint if necessary. So elevate means to increase capacity. So if I've got a constraint that is not producing what I need it to produce, I may need to have resources at the constraint level to actually grow its capacity. And the interesting thing is, since it actually controls the production or the throughput of the whole system, even if they're very expensive uh, new additions to the system, it's usually worth it because they're allowing us to deliver more value overall. Then we can find the next constraint and repeat. Moving on. We need to minimize handoffs and dependencies. So excess dependencies and handoffs are disruptive to team flow and may quickly create excessive context switching and overhead. If you've ever seen this is actually a program board from a safe PI. It's like if you've got a board that looks like this, you've got a problem because you have dependencies all over the place. They're going to be hard to keep track of. And we've got a lot of context switching that's going to happen around it. So what do we do about it? Here's a couple of suggestions. You need to organize around value. Build your team such that they have everything in place to do what is necessary as much as possible on one team. We got to make them visible. We got to make the handoffs and dependencies visible so at least we understand where they are and we don't have any surprises coming down the pipe. And then take corrective action by changing the process, the design system, individual work process, or teams themselves. All right, so let's move a little faster through these. We need to get faster feedback. I think that was fairly obvious. It's like, in order to allow our leadership to fulfill their role of being servant leaders and get out of the command and control structures that they're probably working in now, we need to give them enough information so that they can fully understand what's happening at any given time. So they know what's being done, when we're in trouble on a particular element, when we need additional resources, we need to shift things around. And getting faster feedback is the way that we're going to do that. All right, smaller batches. So here's a diagram that kind of spells out why we need to work in smaller batches. It's got cost of implementation versus items per batch. And you can see there's actually a calculation that you can go through that determines your optimum batch size. So what does this mean if I'm doing loan applications? It means that I might need to limit how many loans I'm bundling into a segment to get it done. I need to control my people's work so that they can show progress quickly and be able to demonstrate that things are moving, and we can break it down into manageable chunks. Number 6 is reducing queue length. So we need to, whenever possible, reduce our queue lengths because queues are wait time. So if the preceding element gets done with their piece and they hand it off to the next component in the chain, and it sits there for 3 weeks, that's not going to be very efficient. So we need to be careful about how we do that and make sure that we minimize the amount of queue that were there. Now, the one queue that I would advise keeping somewhat long is the queue in front of our constraint. And we talked about this a little bit. If the constraint ever gets starved of work, it kills the productivity for the whole system. In fact, it drops the value delivery down to zero for that time. So we need to make sure that the queue always has enough to work. We've got additional capacity on all of the other elements so that we can catch up if we fall behind a little bit. We need to optimize time in the zone. So whatever we're doing, we need to make sure that the people that are actually doing the work have time to actually focus on it and become engaged in it and become almost automatic in performing their task so that they can do it at the optimal level. It is inevitable or is inarguable that the human brains operates in two basic modes. When we're learning something new, think of learning to ride a bike when you were a kid. It was very challenging when you first started doing it. You had to think and you had to try to do things, and it wasn't very fluid. But once you got it mastered, you don't even think about it anymore. You don't think about things that are you do repetitively and get done. This is the basic premise of Agile. Spend a minimal time in the thinking zone or blue zone and get to the point where can work in the red zone, which is actually delivering the work. So we need to make sure that we're minimizing the interruptions to our people, giving them time to actually get in and do the work and move forward. All right, so the last one is remediating legacy policies and practices. And this might be the most important one because it doesn't matter how well our people are trained and how efficiently they're working. If the policies and practices that we have in place do not encourage them or support them in being efficient, we are not going to be successful. So think about this, for example. It's like if I'm implementing a new policy that allows my people to be successful, but I do not change their compensation plan. So this is an HR question. What are they going to do? One of the truer statements I've ever heard is that people are coin operated. They're going to do by default which maximizes their revenue. So make sure that your policies, practices, and processes are in alignment with what you want. Otherwise, don't be surprised if you don't get the results that you want. Um, I would look at this also and say one of the biggest targets I would have is let's change how we do status meetings. If we've given proper feedback and we've got everything in place so that people can see where we are at any given point in time, we should be able to modify the structure of these common status report meeting. We should no longer be reiterating where we are and describing what the process has been. We should be able to jump straight to what are the actions that we need to take. So you should be able to get a status meeting down to just a few minutes because we should identify where we need problems, we should identify what actions need to be taken, and then we should be able to adjourn the meeting and actually go do those things. If you can do that, you will significantly improve the productivity of your teams. It is amazing how many organizations I work with where especially the leaders spend all of their day in meetings, mostly status meetings, and at the end of the day, they look at each other and say, "Did we get anything done today?" So we need people to actually fulfill their roles, to actually be supporting the teams, to be removing obstacles, and delivering more products, whatever that might be. All right, next major topic: feedback. So here's what we need for leaders and for team members. We need real-time visibility for leaders. We need early product problem detection. We need the ability to free our leaders up to fulfill their roles as servant leaders. And then for team members, we need to provide clear priorities, quality assurance, and we need to have deliberate confidence. In other words, we need to provide to the team members quick feedback on the work that they're doing to make sure that what they did met the standard that's going to be expected. All right, so there's a number of metrics associated with flow that can be good feedback mechanisms, and we should take a look at those. First is flow look. How much work is in the system? How many work items do I have, and how much is assigned to any individual team? We've got flow distribution. So flow distribution breaks the work down and says what types of work are people doing, because every organization has types of work. We always have the value add work we want people to be doing, but we also have other types of work that sneaks in. Some companies call that keep the lights on work. Some people call it different things. There are official names for them. So you can come up with a short list of 4 to 6 things that are the types of work that happen in your organization. Flow velocity is how much work do we complete per unit of time. So if you're working in sprints, you may be looking at a 2 week interval. If you're working in Kanban, you might be looking at a 1 month interval. We need to have some recognition and understanding of how much work we're generating per unit of time. Flow time might be the most important one here. It's like from beginning to end, how long does it take to start the work that we're actually doing and deliver the value to the customer at the end? Perhaps my most efficient metric is flow efficiency. Excuse me. Flow efficiency actually looks at how much of the total time spent delivering the work is spent working versus waiting. So how much time is are we in work mode versus wait mode? And it's usually shockingly low when you start looking at an organization because we have long queue times and we have lots of handoffs and we have dependencies that are out there that are obstructing our ability to do things. So here's an example of what a flow metrics dashboard might look like. So we've got all the 5 flow metrics out there. We've got some business calculations thrown in. So providing flow metrics to people and making these available to everybody who's interested gives us the ability to actually understand how work is progressing, how things are flowing, and where we might have a bottleneck that's developing. All right, so I skipped one, I guess. Flow distribution is actually balancing the work types. So distribution is for the work that's being all the work that's being done at any given time, how much falls into each type of work. So you need to have uh, different types of work that happen. We all know that we have technical debt that we're doing. We have risk and we have defect work that's happening. So we need to know what's being done at any given time. And actually, if you get to the point where you're doing a lot of debt, risk, and defect work, well, those are situations that we need to address. So those are things we need to be watching for. Flow efficiency, again, we kind of talked about that. Velocity, these are just visual representations of them, and flow load and flow time. So what am I doing from end to end and how much of the time is being spent in what type of activity? The next set of metrics that I'd like to take a look at are called the DORA metrics. DORA just stands for the DevOps Research Association, Research and Assessment. And they've got a set of metrics that we can take a look at. And this is particularly relevant to software development, so don't freak out about it. We can use them for anything. The first is lead time for changes. How long does it take from the time we commit to actually doing a change to the time we can deliver it? Second is deployment frequency. How frequently am I actually putting new code into production? Third is the change failure rate. Of the changes that I'm putting in, what percentage of them result in failures? And the fourth one is mean time to recover or restore. You'll see recover and restore kind of used interchangeably there. It's like when something does happen, how long does it take me to actually fix it and put it back in place? Now, in really high-end technical organizations that are hugely advanced in doing software development, mean time to restore might be in minutes. In some organizations, that can take days or weeks. So there's a lot of opportunity there to actually get better at doing MTTR. So here's what a DORA metrics dashboard might look like. So we can take a look at the 4 metrics that are out there and give us an understanding of how things are progressing. And this is especially relevant. The DORA metrics are especially relevant to when we're doing software development and we've got a CI/CD pipeline that's out there. So high performing teams are going to deploy multiple times a day, sometimes hundreds of times a day. They're going to have lead times under an hour. So from beginning to end, it may take less than an hour to do it, but they're going to have change failure rates below 15%. I would think substantially below 15%, and recovery times under an hour. So as I said, could be minutes. All right, so we also need to build a feedback platform. We need to think holistically, not in silos. We have to understand and accept that we're going to need multiple data sources in doing this. It's not just one place we're going to draw data from. And we need to design our feedback mechanisms, dashboards usually, for the audience that's going to be consuming them. In other words, if you're giving a dashboard to a high level executive in an organization, they're going to be asking different questions than a low level team leader. So I've worked a lot with a company called Digital AI, and they actually did built a mechanism to handle all of this. So from end to end to pull data from the respective systems, do the necessary transformations, put things together, and then deliver to the appropriate audiences in an appropriate format. So they've got fitness assessments, personal fitness plans, monitoring results. They're using business value assessments, DORA, DevX, developer experience, planning, hygiene, integration, deployment, release, and development, product and productivity and quality. So those are the basic elements that they're using in their plan. And this is kind of how it lays out. So from the bottom, you've got data services that are out there. We have an ingestion service that goes out and collects the information. It does the ETL process, extract, transform, and load, puts it into, and they chose to use a data lake where they can normalize out the data and build the necessary dimensions that are out there could be consistently used. Now, the trick to doing this and making it work in a really large company is that we need to utilize the same dimensions as often as possible. So you need to think ahead and not just think in the small case and think about, okay, let's not build a dimension more than once if we don't have to. So we have then our transformations that are going to happen, and then we're going to have our analysis services that sit on top of them, and then we're going to have our presentation layers that sit on top of that. So whether that's Power BI, Tableau, MicroStrategy, ClickSense, virtually any presentation layer tool that we want to can sit on top of this. So we've got all of the elements in place, and we can draw from virtually any data source to pull it in and actually get a good, healthy view of where things are sitting at the moment. So here's the example process that the Digital AI put together. Say they want to reduce production risk, they're going to improve process hygiene, they're going to improve software quality, and you can see the pieces that are associated with that. We're going to increase speed to production, improve developer experience, and drive business value. So the data sources are below the types of Agile data sources we're going to be connecting to, whether that's service management, release management, Agile planning, source code management, or portfolio planning. So those are the types of databases we're going to have, the elements that we're going to be put in place, the processes that we're going to go through. And this has got a basic timeline associated with it as well. So here's just some of the output that we can get quickly from a dashboard like this. We can have a productivity dashboard, we can have a project health dashboard showing the various elements we would be looking for. And obviously we're using the red, yellow, green analysis to say, let's draw our attention to where things actually need to be addressed. So we can have a backlog advisor. So this is actually a recommendation dashboard to say of the things that we're working on, what is likely to be canceled, and therefore maybe we should invest a lot of time in. We've got things that are out there that should be reviewed and updated. We need to have ones that are ready for delivery. All right, we can have an overall view. So if we've got a product owner that wants a high level view of where things are progressing on the product, we can get that. We can have our flow metrics dashboard. And the last item that we have out there is continuous learning. So for continuous learning, I think it should be obvious to anyone listening to this webinar. Technology is changing really fast. The AI tools are exploding. So we have tons and tons of data out there, and we have new ways of doing things. But as we pointed out, if we don't keep track or keep pace with our processes and policies and tools, we will not be able to get the benefit out of them. We need to be able to adapt our processes, continually refine to reflect new environments and capabilities. And I think this is a good statement. What worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. So don't assume that things that you're doing today or last year are going to work anymore, especially if we're deploying new tool sets. We need to be able to leverage productivity multipliers. So we've got new tools that are coming in which simplify the process and amplify the impact of our existing teams. All right, so one of the things that we're going to do is we need, as leaders of an organization, to create an environment where our people can do their best work, can actually focus on the work and do things. And these are the 5 ideals of work. And the first is locality and simplicity. It's like we need to design systems to be as simple and localized as possible. In other words, when a person's doing their job, they should have a full understanding of what is being asked of them, and they should be able to complete it without having to go out and hunt for other people to assist them in doing it because it wasn't explained well enough. The second is focus, flow, and joy. We need to create environments that enable deep work and satisfaction, let people have the time to actually get in and focus on the work and complete it and do what is find the satisfaction that's associated with completing the tasks that they've been assigned. The third one is improvement of daily work. So if we're not, perhaps even more important than the completion of daily work is the improvement of daily work. So if we're not getting better, we're standing still, and we need to keep getting better. The fourth one is psychological safety. Psychological safety is fostering an environment where risks can be taken without fear. So we shouldn't have our people afraid to make comments or reluctant to give feedback because of repercussions. And the fifth one is customer focus. If the customer isn't involved at all of the decision making steps and at least have a say in the process, we're going to get burned eventually. All right, so here's basically a deeper dive on them. So let's take a look at this. First ideal, locality, and simplicity. In a few ways in which you can do that. Focus, flow, and joy, same thing. So this is another piece that gets back to the blue work, red work type of scheme. So we need to spend time doing the planning. But once we get into doing the work and get committed to doing the work, we need to not be breaking people's concentration to get them back in planning mode again. Continuous improvement of daily work, the third ideal. So it's like we need to allocate dedicated time for improving work. The 20% rule is a good target. Measure improvements with clear metrics. So celebrate small wins to build momentum and make improvement part of everyone's job. It's not a separate activity. And psychological safety is number 4. We got to have a blame-free culture. It's like nobody likes to have fingers pointed at them, and that really detracts from trust within an organization. If somebody feels like they're going to be taken to the woodshed because they made a decision to do something and it didn't work out, then we got to do something different. We need to encourage diverse perspectives. It's often the person who is least likely to contribute that we need to hear from the most. And we need to reward risk taking. It's like obviously we need to have some constraints on risk. We can't afford to be taking risks that would cripple the company. But people that are taking risks, if we don't take risks, we don't make progress. If we don't try things that we haven't done before, we can't have progress. And the last is customer focus. So customer focus is the last thing. So we need to regularly gather customer feedback throughout development. We need to measure success by customer outcomes, not by internal metrics. So in other words, what we think about what we deliver to the customer is way less important than what the customer thinks. We need to prioritize work based on customer value, not internal politics, and build empathy through direct customer interaction. All right, so that is the end of our content for this webinar. And I don't know if you have any questions, please contact me if you do. And I will hopefully see you on the next webinar.